Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are very happy to share with you different stories about love and betrayal from around the world. Now, let's begin our story journey today. Harlan stood silently in front of the computer in his home office, his expression frozen. The security system footage mercilessly played, Elise chuckling softly as she placed her hand on that man's shoulder, skillfully entering the door lock code. The two exchanging smiles as they walked into their home. Harlan felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if he had returned to that time on the field when a 300-pound defender broke his ribs. But this time, the pain came from his heart. For years ago, Harlan was the star quarterback of the Texas Eagles, a football star worshipped by countless fans. In a crucial playoff game, he had endured the excruciating pain of a torn knee ligament to lead his team to an incredible comeback. In the hospital room after the game, it was Elise who appeared before him with a bouquet of flowers, tears in her eyes. At that time, she was the captain of the team's cheerleading squad, and their love story had been front-page news in the sports section. "Bear with it, my hero," Elise had said then, gently stroking his forehead. "This is only temporary." However, the injury was far more serious than they had imagined. After 3 surgeries and 18 months of rehabilitation, doctors finally announced that Harlan could never return to the professional field. Lying in his hospital bed, holding Elise's hand, his gaze was unusually determined. "I won't end like this," he told her. "I have a plan." Harlan invested the salary and endorsement fees he had accumulated over the years to create a sports-themed restaurant chain brand called Champions Restaurant. His idea was to combine sports culture with cuisine, creating a dining space specifically for sports enthusiasts. Although he hired a professional management team, as the founder, he still invested a lot of time ensuring the brand matched his vision. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Elise had asked while standing on their home terrace, gazing at the lights of downtown Austin. "Those managers can handle everything. You don't need to go there every day." "The initial stage is crucial," Harlan explained. "I need to ensure everything runs according to my standards. Trust me, this will succeed." Harlan noticed a flash of discontent in Elise's eyes. As time passed, this discontent gradually transformed into obvious complaints. The restaurant's initial investment was huge, but returns were slow, forming a stark contrast with the affluent lifestyle she had expected. Elise had once been that girl who would appear in the stands at every game to cheer for him. She enjoyed the aura of being a star's wife, the feeling of being pursued by reporters, the attention of tens of thousands of followers on social media. After retirement, all of this disappeared. Harlan could feel her loss, but he focused on rebuilding his career, believing this was just a temporary low. "I don't understand why we have to live like this," Elise complained during a dinner, her fingers lightly tapping the table. "You were once a star, now you're just a restaurant owner, and we even have to start controlling our vacation budget." Harlan put down his cutlery and sighed softly. "This is temporary, Elise. All startups are like this. We're not out of money. We just need to invest rationally. When we first met, you bought me earrings worth $20,000 just because I said they were pretty." Discontent flickered in Elise's eyes. "Now you frown because I want to travel to Europe for 2 weeks? The restaurant is just starting. It needs stable cash flow. Once the situation stabilizes, we can live like we used to." Harlan tried to explain, but he could feel that Elise was no longer listening patiently. Subtle cracks began to appear in their marriage. Although Harlan was busy with his startup, he always tried to balance work and family. Tuesday and Friday evenings were their date nights, and on weekends, he would ensure at least one full day to accompany Elise. He would take her to movies, to try new restaurants, and even occasionally on short trips. However, Elise seemed increasingly indifferent to these attempts. She began to appear frequently on social media, posting photos with various celebrities, as if constantly reminding herself and others that she still belonged to that high-end circle. "You know what? Finley invited me to his party at the ranch yesterday," Elise casually mentioned one evening while changing clothes in the dressing room. "The hottest DJs in the city will be there." "Who is Finley?" Harlan looked up from reading the quarterly financial reports. "He's the son of oil tycoon Prescott." Elise seemed somewhat excited, her tone rising by 8 octaves. "They have a huge ranch in the West. Rumor has it that just his private stables are worth 7 figures. We met at the charity gala last month. I mentioned him to you." Harlan vaguely remembered that gala, an event attended by a group of sports celebrities after a photo of him with an old teammate accidentally went viral on social media. He had been busy talking with potential investors and hadn't paid much attention to Elise's social activities. Sounds fun. Let's go together this weekend. Harlan tried to show interest. Elise's expression flashed a hint of awkwardness. Actually, the party doesn't really welcome outsiders. Finley said it's a small circle event. I thought as your husband, I should be part of your circle. Harlan raised an eyebrow, trying to cover his discomfort with a joke. You know what I mean, Elise said impatiently. It's just a friends gathering, no need to make a big deal out of it. After that conversation, Elise began to appear frequently at various social occasions, always with excuses like old friends gathering or charity events. Harlan noticed that she smiled at her phone more and more often, but whenever he approached, she would quickly lock the screen. At first, Harlan thought this was just a temporary issue. They had been married for 5 years, always loving and loyal. Elise was just adapting to the changes in life, he told himself. As the restaurant business gradually got on track, she would regain her sense of security. However, the seed of unease had already been planted. Harlan began to notice subtle changes in Elise's words and actions. She started using new perfumes, purchasing clothes in styles different from her usual, always meticulously dressed before going out, and coming home later and later. Until that Saturday, when Harlan returned home early wanting to surprise Elise. Their marriage had been tense for a while, and he hoped to take her to a newly opened French restaurant for dinner, trying to recapture some of the romance of bygone days. However, when he walked in the door, he heard laughter coming from the bedroom from afar. When he pushed open the door and saw Elise and a handsome young man sitting intimately at the edge of their bed, the world seemed to stand still. On the bed were scattered several photos, apparently from some party. What's going on here? Harlan's voice was surprisingly calm. Elise stood up as if electrocuted, her wine glass nearly spilling. That man, Finley, showed a smile somewhere between awkward and defiant. Harlan, you're back too early. Elise's tone was defensive. This is Finley, my friend. He just came over to help me organize some social event photos. Harlan's gaze swept across the room, noting the 2 wine glasses on the bedside table, the half-opened bottle of red wine, and Finley's coat draped over the chair back. Everything indicated this was not simply photo organizing. Friends don't laugh and chat in someone else's bedroom. Harlan stared at Finley, especially when that person's husband isn't home. Finley stood up and straightened his shirt. Hey man, calm down. Elise was just showing me your house. I've always wanted to buy in this area. Get out. Harlan pointed to the door, his voice still calm, but his eyes were like frost right now. Finley glanced at Elise, shrugged, and walked out of the bedroom. After the door closed, Elise's expression changed from shock to anger. You were so rude. He's just a friend. Harlan walked to the bedside table and picked up her phone. Is that why you've been locking your screen lately? Why every time you mention a party, you don't want me to go with you? Why the home security footage shows you bringing him in several times when I'm not home? Elise's face changed. You're spying on me? No. I was just checking our home security system and found some interesting footage, Harlan said. You've been cheating, Elise. Elise didn't respond immediately. She walked to the window, turning her back to Harlan, arms crossed over her chest, silent for a moment. When she turned around, the anger in her expression had been replaced by a strange calmness. I didn't want you to find out so soon, she finally said, her tone both somewhat defensive and slightly relieved. But yes, Finley and I have been together for a while. We were planning to find the right time to tell you. Tell me what? Harlan asked, with a trace of pain finally in his voice. Tell you that our marriage is over. Elise looked directly into Harlan's eyes. I haven't been happy for a long time, Harlan. I didn't marry you to be the wife of a fast food chain owner. We aren't poor, Elise. I'm just investing in our future. I thought you could understand that. Investing? Elise let out a short laugh. You're wasting our savings on that stupid restaurant. And Finley, he doesn't need to invest. He already has everything. He can give me the life I want. Let me do what I want, without worrying all day about the restaurant's balance sheet. She stepped closer, her expression becoming more critical. Do you know where he took me last week? His private yacht. We spent 3 whole days in the Gulf of Mexico. And you didn't even notice I wasn't home. Do you know why? Because you were too busy with your damn restaurant. Harlan felt a sting. What she said wasn't entirely true. He had noticed her absence, but Elise had told him she was visiting an old friend in Houston. He had chosen to trust her, and now that trust seemed so foolish. Everything I've done has been for our future. Harlan tried to stay calm. I thought we were a team, Elise. I thought you would support me, just as I once supported you. Support you to do what? Watch our standard of living decline. Elise's voice was full of contempt. Finley understands what I want. The collar his dog wears costs more than the gift you gave me for our last anniversary. Her words stabbed like knives into Harlan's heart. Once, this woman had been his support when he was injured, a witness to the most glorious moments of his career. And now, she stood there, denying all his efforts with the cruelest words. I understand, Harlan said calmly. What kind of ending do you want, Elise? Elise looked surprised, as if not expecting Harlan to be so direct. Since it's all out in the open, I think we should end this marriage. I'm happy with Finley. He knows how to enjoy life, how to make me happy. Then go, Harlan said quietly. I'll contact a lawyer to handle the divorce. Elise was stunned. You're not going to try to keep me? Why would I keep someone who doesn't love me, doesn't respect me? Harlan asked, his voice steady. Someone who thinks all my efforts are worthless? Someone who chooses to betray me at my most difficult time? Elise's expression flashed a moment of uncertainty, as if she hadn't expected Harlan to let go so decisively. But this uncertainty was quickly replaced by a defiant attitude. You'll regret this, she regained her arrogant demeanor. When you're alone, guarding that restaurant doomed to fail, you'll think of today. Think of how easily you gave up on our marriage. No, Elise, Harlan shook his head. It was you who gave up on our marriage, the moment you decided to betray. Now, please pack your things and leave. That night, Elise packed most of her clothes and jewelry and moved to Finley's luxurious ranch in the suburbs. Harlan sat alone in the empty living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, yet strangely calm inside. The phone rang. It was his lawyer, Gareth. She didn't sign a prenup, Gareth's voice came through. But the good news is that Texas is a no-fault divorce state. You have solid evidence of infidelity, and the restaurant was established with your personal assets, so she'll have a hard time getting much. I don't care about the money, Harlan said. I just want to end this as soon as possible. After hanging up, Harlan stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the night view of Austin. He couldn't help but wonder why he felt so calm about the breakdown of his marriage. Perhaps because over the past year, as Elise gradually drifted away, he had already prepared himself internally for this moment, just never wanted to admit it. In the days that followed, Harlan seemed infused with new energy. He began to reassess his restaurant business, finding that while the foundation was solid, the market strategy indeed needed adjustment. He redesigned the menu, improved the store layout, personally reviewed every detail, and renegotiated terms with suppliers and partners. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings were underway. Each meeting with the lawyer reminded Harlan of those days with Elise, both sweet and bitter. But he didn't let these memories occupy too many of his thoughts, because he knew that relationship was truly over. A month later, Harlan received an unexpected text message from his former teammate Thaddeus, now a star in the league. Heard about you and Elise, brother. Are you okay? Harlan replied, better than expected. Are you in town? Yes, season break. Heard you opened a restaurant? How does it feel to eat there, brother? Why don't you come see for yourself? Harlan replied, you're welcome anytime. 2 days later, Thaddeus appeared at the main store of Champion's Restaurant. He sampled multiple dishes from the menu and couldn't stop praising the atmosphere Harlan had created. This place is great, Thaddeus said, looking around at the sports memorabilia and carefully designed space. Feels like being back in the locker room, but more comfortable, more family-friendly. The food is excellent too, especially that steak sandwich named after you. That's exactly the effect I wanted, Harlan smiled, to make sports fans feel like part of the team while providing a high-quality dining experience. Thaddeus nodded thoughtfully. You know what? I've always wanted to do some investment outside of sports. Football careers eventually end. I need to plan for the future. Maybe we could talk about possible collaboration. Are you serious? Harlan was somewhat surprised. Of course, Thaddeus laughed. I know you, Harlan. You never give up on the field, even in the toughest games. You have the same attitude toward your business. I believe this will succeed. This meeting became a turning point. Thaddeus not only decided to invest in Champion's restaurant, but also voluntarily offered to become a brand ambassador. He shared photos of the restaurant on his social media with the caption, "Supporting my old teammate Harlan, his Champion's restaurant is definitely worth a visit." Soon, more sports stars began to take notice of the project. A current basketball star contacted Harlan, expressing that he also wanted to invest and open a branch in his city. Fans began to view dining at Champion's restaurant as a kind of pilgrimage, hoping to chance upon their favorite athletes. Within just 3 months, the number of restaurant customers tripled, and site selection for the second and third branches had already begun. Meanwhile, a professional venture capital firm also extended an olive branch to Harlan. "Your brand positioning is very accurate," investment manager Vivian commented during a meeting. "Sports-themed restaurants aren't a new concept, but you've combined the culture of professional athletes with quality dining experience so perfectly. That's innovation. Plus, with your reputation and connections as a former professional athlete, this is a project with immense potential." The investment negotiations proceeded exceptionally smoothly. When the final documents were signed, Harlan's company valuation had reached 8 figures, while he still retained primary control. In the media's view, this was a perfect from sports star to successful businessman transformation story. Meanwhile, Elise's social media accounts were filled with photos of her luxurious life with Finley, private jets, European vacations, parties on luxury yachts. Each photo deliberately tagged the location and price, as if trying to prove to the world, especially to Harlan, how right her choice had been. A few times, she even sent these photos directly to Harlan, but he never replied. However, Harlan hardly had time to pay attention to these things. The divorce proceedings had been completed, and with his generous concessions, Elise had received more property than she was legally entitled to. Harlan just wanted to end this relationship as soon as possible and move forward. With the thriving restaurant business and the injection of investment, Harlan began to consider a more ambitious plan. Through a real estate broker, he learned that a larger piece of land next to Finley's family ranch was for sale, with better geographical location, natural water sources, and better views. Initially, Harlan was only interested in this property for business reasons. He wanted to build a complex combining sports training facilities and high-end vacation experiences as an extension of the Champion brand. But when he learned that this land was right next to Finley's family estate, he couldn't help but feel a sense of ironic satisfaction. "Are you sure you want to buy that land?" his financial advisor asked. "It's quite a large investment, and the location is quite special." Harlan looked at the property plans and nodded. "I'm sure. This will be the perfect base for my next plan. It has panoramic views, is close to water sources, has convenient transportation, exactly what I need." He didn't mention the land's relationship to Finley's family ranch, but deep down, he admitted that part of the decision was due to personal factors, not for revenge, but to prove that his choices and path were correct. One morning, when the convoy of construction vehicles majestically entered the road to the new property, Finley was jogging outside his ranch. He stopped, watching the massive convoy pass, and frowned. From that day on, every morning, construction noise would punctually begin at 7 o'clock, disrupting Finley's habitual party-then-sleep-till-noon lifestyle. One day, Finley couldn't stand it anymore and drove to the construction site to complain. When he saw the huge sign at the entrance to the site, his expression froze. Champion Sports and Entertainment Center includes professional training facilities, luxury residences, and helipad, cradle of future champions. And standing in the center of the site, talking with the architects, was Harlan himself. When Finley realized that a more magnificent complex than his family estate was about to rise next to his ranch, he felt an indescribable discomfort. Especially when he learned that the owner of this building was none other than Elise's ex-husband Harlan. This discomfort transformed into evident anxiety. "How is it you?" Finley got out of the car and approached Harlan, with clear hostility in his tone. Harlan turned around. A flash of coldness crossed his eyes when he saw Finley, then returned to calmness. "Finley, I didn't expect to see you here. You're building such a large project next to my house. What does this mean?" Finley demanded. "Purely a business decision," Harlan calmly replied. "This land has excellent geographical location and natural resources, very suitable for my project plans." You think I'll believe this is a coincidence? Finley scoffed. This is a provocation towards me, right? Harlan laughed lightly. You overestimate your importance in my life. This project is worth tens of millions of dollars. Do you really think I would make such an investment decision based on personal grudges? I'm a businessman, not a teenager. His tone and posture made Finley feel uneasy. The Harlan before him was completely different from the image of the pitiful abandoned ex-husband he had imagined. He stood there, confident and composed, his eyes revealing a firmness and wisdom that Finley rarely saw in people his age. Whatever you say, the construction noise here has seriously interfered with my life, Finley complained. I will deal with this through lawyers. Please do, Harlan shrugged. Our work fully complies with all local building regulations and environmental requirements. In fact, we're working with the local community to ensure this project brings employment and economic growth to the entire region. Finley was at a loss for words, could only glare angrily at Harlan before leaving. Back in the car, he slammed the steering wheel hard. He had never imagined that Harlan would reappear in his life this way, not as a pitiful abandoned wretch, but as an evidently more successful business rival. Did you know Harlan is buying land next to your house to build? One day, Finley's friend asked half-jokingly at a party. That land should have been for our family's expansion. Finley sipped his expensive whiskey, with a hint of annoyance in his voice. But my father thought the price was too high. Now that restaurant owner has bought it. How ironic. Restaurant owner, his friend laughed. Haven't you been following the news? Harlan's Champions restaurant is now one of the fastest expanding chain brands nationwide. Last quarter, they received a $200 million investment, and the company valuation has already exceeded $1 billion. Finley's face changed. That's impossible. He's just a retired athlete who opened a few restaurants. This just has made him the cover figure of business magazines, his friend teased. There are even rumors that a major sports channel is in talks with him for a reality show about entrepreneurship. It seems some people need to update their knowledge of market dynamics. Finley returned home and immediately searched online for recent news about Harlan. Each piece of news made his mood heavier. Multiple sports stars investing in Champions Restaurant. Harlan named Entrepreneur of the Year. Champions Restaurant plans to open 100 branches nationwide. Harlan gives exclusive interview to Fortune magazine, sharing his successful transition from sports to business. And while he was absorbed in these news items, Elise pushed open the study door. Darling, what are you busy with? She walked over and embraced him from behind. When she saw Harlan's photo on the screen, her expression became complex. Are you checking up on him? Just curious. Finley quickly closed the page and turned to Elise. Did you know he's become so successful now? Elise's expression flashed a hint of discomfort. I've seen some news. So what? Isn't our life better? Her words sounded somewhat forced, which made Finley feel a strange unease. Since moving to the ranch, Elise had certainly enjoyed a luxurious life. The most expensive clothes, the newest jewelry, a private jet available anytime. But recently, she seemed to have gradually lost enthusiasm for these things, often sitting alone lost in thought, or staring at her phone browsing social media for long periods. Meanwhile, Finley himself was also facing pressure. His family's oil business had certainly been affected by market fluctuations, but the bigger problem was his own management issues. Since taking over part of the family assets, he had invested large amounts in luxury goods and real estate, rather than innovation and diversification. His father had begun to question his decisions, and contradictions within the family were deepening daily. You seem a bit distracted lately, Elise said one night, lying on their bedroom's extra-large bed. Has something happened? Finley closed his laptop and forced a smile. Nothing, just some family business issues. Oil prices are fluctuating a bit, affecting some investments. Initially, Elise didn't care about these business details until she began to notice some subtle changes. The scale of parties gradually shrinking, Finley becoming more reserved about her lavish shopping. He even canceled their long-planned global yacht trip. Why can't we buy that new Elsa handbag? Elise asked, dissatisfied one day at a luxury shopping center in Dallas. Last month you said you'd buy me the whole collection. Finley looked at her impatiently. Last month and this month are different situations. Now is not the time for lavish spending. Are you saying we have financial problems? Elise asked, surprised. I'm saying we need to consume more rationally, Finley's tone had a touch of impatience. We can't just immediately buy everything we like. Elise stood there, listening to these words, feeling a strong sense of déjà vu. This was almost identical to what Harlan had told her before. Only then, she had mocked Harlan's rational investment. And now, the same words from Finley's mouth carried a sense of real threat. Meanwhile, Harlan's presence was growing stronger. Not just because of the luxury mansion under construction, but because his business achievements had become a topic of conversation locally and even nationally. Local newspapers described him as the perfect transition from sports star to business tycoon, and television programs competed to invite him to share his entrepreneurial experiences. One evening, while Elise was browsing social media, she saw a video of Harlan being interviewed by a well-known financial program. The Harlan on screen was confident and composed, spoke professionally, very different from the husband she remembered who only cared about sports and the restaurant. In the interview, Harlan showcased his newly built corporate headquarters, a very modern building where employees enthusiastically worked in an open space. "He looks very different," Elise murmured, involuntarily enlarging the video image to carefully observe Harlan's expression and gestures. "Who?" Finley walked into the room, glanced at her phone screen, and visibly tensed when he saw Harlan's face. "Nothing." Elise quickly locked the screen, just watching the news. But Finley had already seen, and his expression darkened. "You're still following him?" "I just came across this video by chance," Elise defended, but her tone wasn't very firm. "Really? Then why is your browsing history full of news about him?" Finley's voice suddenly rose. "You think I don't know you've been tracking his activities?" Elise looked up shocked. "You checked my phone?" "I don't need to check," Finley sneered. "The expression on your face every time you see news about him already says it all." This argument was just the beginning of a series of conflicts. As the days passed, the relationship between Finley and Elise gradually deteriorated. Finley began to go out frequently, sometimes even staying out all night. When he was home, his attitude toward Elise was increasingly cold, even with a hint of disdain. Elise found herself increasingly like an ignored decoration rather than an important partner in Finley's life. She began to reflect on her decision, wondering why she had initially believed that being with Finley would be happier than her marriage with Harlan. As the construction progressed, the outlines of Harlan's new mansion became increasingly clear. From Finley's ranch, one could even see that magnificent building nearing completion, a modern style perfectly fused with Texas tradition, with a courtyard more spacious than Finley's family's, and even professional-level training facilities and a helipad. One day, while Elise was looking for documents in Finley's study, she accidentally discovered a stack of legal papers. After carefully reading them, she was surprised to find that these were mortgage documents for the estate. What shocked her even more was that Finley seemed to have mortgaged the ranch multiple times to support his luxurious lifestyle. When Elise confronted Finley about these documents, he exploded. "What right do you have to go through my private papers?" Finley's face twisted with anger. "This is my house, my property." "I thought we were partners," Elise retorted. "You promised me our future would be worry-free. You said Harlan was a loser and that you would give me everything I wanted. That was when I thought you would bring me value." Finley sneered. "What do you know how to do besides spend money? At least Harlan is creating wealth, and you? An ex-cheerleading captain who only knows how to depend on men." Elise felt as if she had been doused with cold water. These words hurt her, not just because of their cruelty, but because they revealed a brutal truth. In Finley's eyes, she was no different from his expensive sports cars and luxury yachts, just another way to display his wealth. And what shocked her even more was that Finley also believed Harlan was worth more than himself, a recognition that made her question her initial choice. Weeks later, the situation further deteriorated. Finley's family business fell into more serious trouble, oil prices continued to drop, and combined with Finley's series of unwise investments, their financial situation was precarious. "We need to sell some assets," Finley's father Prescott said seriously at a family meeting, including considering selling part of the ranch land. "Sell the ranch? But this is our family's property for generations." Finley protested in shock. "If you had listened to my advice earlier about diversifying investments, we wouldn't be in this situation," Prescott said coldly. "Now we have no choice." What made it even harder for Finley to accept was that Harlan's company was said to be one of the most interested potential buyers for the ranch. "I'd rather sell to anyone but him," Finley told his father firmly. "In business, personal feelings are a luxury," Prescott sighed. "If his offer is the highest, we sell to him. That's final." When Finley gave this news to Elise, he expected to see her shock and dissatisfaction. However, Elise's reaction was unexpected. "Maybe this is the best outcome," she said calmly. "At least Harlan will manage this land well, instead of just squandering it like you." Finley was enraged. "Now you're taking his side? After tasting life here, enjoying everything I've given you." "What have I enjoyed?" Elise countered. "A relationship full of lies? A man who only sees me as a decoration? A spoiled rich kid who actually doesn't measure up to my ex-husband?" Finley's face turned ashen. "Enough. I'm sick of your complaints and comparisons. If you miss your ex-husband so much, why don't you go back to him?" "Maybe I should," Elise blurted out, immediately realizing what she had said, but it was too late to take it back. The air was filled with tense silence. Finally, Finley spoke, his voice low and cold. "I'm going to New York tomorrow to handle some things. When I get back, I hope you and your belongings are not here. We're done." Days later, Elise received a letter from Finley's lawyer. Finley had unilaterally terminated their lease agreement, and Elise was shocked to discover that legally she was just a tenant of the ranch. She was required to move out within 30 days. "He can't do this," Elise told her lawyer. "We've been living together for months." "I'm afraid he can," the lawyer patiently explained. "You're not married, nor did you sign any property sharing agreement. Legally, you're just a tenant, and the lease has been legally terminated." Elise desperately sought help from friends, but found that most of those who once surrounded her had already distanced themselves. In her marriage with Harlan, her social circle partially came from Harlan's professional background. And with Finley, her circle of friends was almost entirely due to Finley's wealth and status. Now, both these pillars of support were lost. Finally, Elise had to move out of that luxury ranch she had once prided herself on. She rented an ordinary apartment in the urban area and began to think about her future. Her savings were limited, her professional skills almost non-existent, and her social media influence had also significantly decreased as her aura faded. One evening, Elise stood by her apartment window, looking at the barely visible outline of Harlan's newly built luxury mansion in the distance. The lights there were warm and bright, in stark contrast to her dim single apartment. A few months ago, she had still been mocking Harlan for sticking with his failing restaurant, and now he had built a business empire, while she had lost everything. During that difficult period when private yoga classes decreased, massage appointments were canceled, and custom clothing orders were suspended, Elise began to truly reflect on the direction of her life. For the first time, she realized that her previous life value was completely built on being an appendage to a successful man. Whether as Harlan's wife or Finley's girlfriend, she had never truly constructed her own identity and abilities. At a job counseling session, Elise met a hiring manager from a public relations company. With her experience as a former cheerleading captain and ex-wife of a professional athlete, she obtained an entry-level PR assistant position, responsible for assisting with events for sports and entertainment clients. The work was hard, and the salary far from the living standard she had previously enjoyed, but Elise gradually found a new kind of satisfaction. She began to understand Harlan's dedication and passion when he started his business, to comprehend why he had invested so much energy into what seemed like a small restaurant project. Meanwhile, Harlan's life was experiencing a series of successes. Champion's Restaurant had already opened 50 branches nationwide, and his sports and entertainment complex was about to be completed, attracting the attention of countless sports stars and business leaders. He had already successfully transitioned from sports star to respected entrepreneur, and his story was even being studied as a case at Harvard Business School. At a brand event in a luxury shopping center in Dallas, Elise's company was in charge of receiving guests. While she was checking the guest list, a familiar voice came from behind. "Elise." She turned around and saw Harlan. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, with a serene and confident air, a flash of surprise in his eyes. "Harlan," she tried to maintain a professional smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Me neither," he nodded. "I heard you're working in PR now." "Yes," Elise admitted, feeling a strange shame. life has changed a bit. After exchanging a few words, Harlan politely said goodbye and headed toward the VIP area of the event. Elise watched his retreating figure, feeling a complex mix of emotions. No anger, no resentment, not even regret, just a quiet acceptance. Their paths had completely forked, with no possibility of intersecting again. Half a year later, Harlan acquired part of the land from Finley's family ranch, expanding his sports and entertainment complex. At the opening ceremony, numerous sports stars and business leaders attended, with media competing for coverage. Harlan stood in the spotlight, sharing his entrepreneurial journey and future vision. That failing restaurant his wife had once mocked had become a nationally successful brand. Meanwhile, Finley, due to financial problems and poor management, had to give up control of the family business, accepting board supervision. His luxurious lifestyle was significantly reduced, and those friends and followers who once surrounded him also gradually faded away. Elise continued working at the PR company, gradually establishing her own professional reputation. She no longer depended on anyone, nor defined her value as someone's wife or someone's girlfriend. In some ways, she found an independence and autonomy she had never had before. Years later, at a sports charity gala, Elise met Harlan again. He had already become a well-known entrepreneur and philanthropist in the industry, while she had been promoted to senior manager at the PR company. When their gazes met across the crowd, both nodded slightly in acknowledgement, but did not approach to chat. Some stories, once ended, no longer need new chapters. Harlan stood at his office window, overlooking the city landscape. His phone lit up with the new quarterly report sent by his team, results hitting new highs. He thought of his journey, from a brilliant sports career to the lowest point in his career to his current success. He didn't regret any decision, including not trying to keep Elise, because he understood that true success isn't just wealth and reputation, but also maintaining one's initial ideals and values, regardless of what betrayals and challenges are faced. And those who chose to betray and look down on him would eventually see the consequences of their choices. If this story has resonated with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. We look forward to seeing you in our next story.